All right, so here we go. All right, let's see. All right, so bear with me, just checking to make sure we've got everybody. There we go. I hope everybody's enjoying the weather because it's absolutely beautiful outside.
We should do this in a public park. Just space out.
Social distancing. All right, so it looks like we've got majority of folks on. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So my name is Mallory Nash, and I'm the program manager for Current Young Professionals. It's a program of the Greater Green Bay Chamber. And right now, you've seen things out there about Chamber at Home. That's the series that we're doing right now. So we're collaborating with the Chamber to do dual events, and this is one of them. So we're really excited to be able to offer this opportunity. It was supposed to be our current week Dine and Develop that we were going to do, and thankfully all the panelists were already booked for this day, and so that they would be willing to continue and do this virtually. So we really appreciate that. So I would like to thank you all for attending today. I think this is going to be a really great opportunity just to hear from these panelists and the experience with mentorship. We've got some questions that we've identified, and I'll let Ryan explain more of that. I would also like to take a few minutes to ask you after this call. I will be sending out an email to request that you just take a couple of seconds to fill out a survey to let us know what you liked about this, anything that we could do better, topics that you would like for future, because mentorship is something that a lot of us obviously see an importance of. And so I would love to get your feedback on topics that maybe you would like us to look into for future professional development. Lastly, I would like to thank our sustaining partners for making today possible. Those sustaining partners are the Green Bay Packers Give Back, Associated Bank, Purveya, Imperial Supplies, and the Schneider MBA program at St. Norbert. Brenda, I see you on here. Thank you so much for supporting the program. We really appreciate you and all the sustaining partners. I would like to go ahead and introduce Ryan Gracyalny from the Professional Development Committee and the leadership team. Also, we have Beth Hudak, who is also on the Professional Development Committee and the leadership team. They are the chair and the co-chair for the Professional Development Committee. So they do all the work behind the scenes. They do a really fabulous job. So I would like to welcome Ryan Gracyalny.
Thank you. Thanks, Mallory. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to get to be a part of this. Before I talk about myself, I want to talk about why we're doing this. In August, September, as a leadership team for Current, we planned a kickoff event that had everybody in all of the committees get together and do some brainstorming. And we wanted to understand what were young professionals craving so we could cater our programming towards that. And what so many people kind of hinted at was, I want to know how to be a mentor or be a part of a mentorship process where I can gain some insights from people who have experience. So the feedback was overwhelmingly consistent that mentorship was something to focus on. So this quarter, we're going to be focusing on our conversation today. So investing in people, a conversation on mentorship is our topic today. And in the future, we're looking at doing some follow-up events too. So keep your eyes pinned for that. So again, my name is Ryan Gracyalny. I am a organizational development consultant and the lead trainer with the Utech group. Basically, I help people, teams, and organizations get better and navigate change of all types. So I love people. I love getting to do this work. And I've had a profound experience in mentorship myself. So this is really near and dear to my heart. I want to talk a little bit about how this is going to work. So we've got until about 1:30, and we've got 4 awesome panelists who are going to answer some questions that we've come up with, but then give you some time at the end. We're going to save about 15 minutes for question and answer, and Mallory and Beth are going to help me out with that. we'd ask you to submit any questions you have through the chat. If you could keep yourselves muted through this and then submit any questions through the chat, that would be the easiest way to navigate this with about 60 people on a call. So we'd appreciate that from you guys. If you have any questions or challenges, also put that in the chat, and Mallory will do her best to help you out. So without further ado, the panelists that are joining us today, again, we're really thankful to have these four. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just give you the highest level introduction, and then we're going to have each of them kind of talk a little bit about themselves, what they do, their paths, and how mentorship has played a role in their life. And then we'll get into some deeper questions from them. So first, we have Steve Baue, CEO, speaker, coach, consultant at ERC. We've got Shannon Wienand, the director of House of Hope. Thanks for giving the waves.
Oh, sorry, did I miss my wave? Sorry.
Hey, Steve. We have Anna Steinfest, the president and CEO of AFF Research, LLC. And we have Tanisha Meidel, PhD, the assistant VP for academic affairs at St. Norbert College. So thank the four of you for being here. Steve, would you like to start us off? Just give us a little bit about background about you, what you do, and how mentorship has played a role in your life.
Sure, and thank you, Current and Mallory and the professional development team for putting us together today and for coordinating this. I know how Zoom calls can be a bit of an unwieldy beast, so I appreciate the management that goes into this. Real quick as a backdrop, Ryan already gave you my multiple titles. You know, I'm blessed. I'm a kid from Superior, Wisconsin, who through a couple of accidents and the occasional plan, ended up having a great corporate career for almost 25 years. Most of my focus was on organizational development from an internal perspective. And so the big global corporations I worked for, how do we improve the organization through processes, but more important through leaders. I left that 6 years ago to buy ERC, which is a mental wellness, mental health counseling business. I am not a counselor. I believe in mental health, but I'm the last guy you want to talk to about it. I have really good counselors who work for me. What happened shortly after buying ERC, though, is I started getting phone calls from people that knew me from my corporate career and said, well, now that you're not working for just one company, can you help me? And that kind of gave birth to my consulting business, which is keynotes and workshops, but the bulk of it is coaching. And coaching is just the more, what I call the more pinpointed mentoring of that type of growth. Without taking too much time on that explanation, you know, I believe, Ryan, you asked, you know, what the role mentorship has played into that career. And you know, as I started, I was a kid from Superior that thought, you know, if I could become a supervisor in a small company, that I would have made it. I didn't expect to be an executive VP. How I got there was through people at certain points in my life taking an interest in me and my career. And I was reflecting on these questions when Ryan sent them out before. There was never, I don't ever remember having a discussion where I said, so you're going to be my mentor, right? It was always much more of this kind of natural, I'd ask a question, they'd give a good answer, I'd come back to them, and then pretty soon we were having regular discussions. And when I look at really the three that really had such a profound impact on me, the first was, I was in school, it was a teacher. And that was really my first taste of somebody believing me and kind of giving me a behind the curtain look of how, in this case, it was a speech teacher who got me into forensics and got me comfortable in speaking in front of a group, something that I never thought I would be comfortable with. The second one was my boss for a good chunk of my corporate career. He was an executive CHRO, multi-billion-dollar company, and for some reason, he saw some potential in me and would take the time to not only guide me and explain things to me, but also hold me accountable. And that meant occasionally kicking my butt on some things. And then the third person is of all things, he's an executive recruiter. And he was the one I called when I said, I think I want to leave corporate and I want to buy a business. and he's still the guy that I call today to say, hey, can I run something past you? What's your thoughts on this? He has no bearing on my business. He has no connection to mental wellness counseling, but he's somebody that I can call. How's that, Ryan?
That's perfect. That's what we're looking for. Thank you, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon, would you be willing to go next? Kind of tell us a little bit about your path and the role that mentorship has played.
Sure. You know, as I was thinking about today, there were so many people who I could name, you know, who had a pretty profound influence in my life. You know, and I think that there's probably not enough time in the day for me to name all of them. But you know, at its core, I think mentorship started with my parents and with my grandmother. And as Steve talked about, you know, people who also need to hold you accountable, that was a really good example for me. And that's continued for me in my professional life as well. You know, just really, you need to lean on those people who can say, you know what, yep, you failed at that pretty bad. But I believe in you and you can try it again. And I'm going to check in with you next week and see how that's going for you. You know, and I think that I have a lot of mentors here at House of Hope. I'm the director at House of Hope. It's an emergency shelter for young parents with children. And we have an amazing group of staff members here. And I would say they mentor me as I mentor them. You know, just it's a two-way street. A lot of learning that occurs. But yeah, I'm really excited to participate today. I do think it kind of begins with being vulnerable. I think that you really have to be transparent in order to receive feedback and act on that. My good friend Ryan helped me through some of that.
Glad I could be a part of it.
Yeah, so I think that it really starts from within, though, from within yourself, you know, and just making sure that you're open to accepting that type of a relationship is probably the first step.
Cool. Thank you very much, Shannon. Appreciate it. Anna,
well,
you're the lucky one.
I think I may have similar path like Steve and Shannon, similar and not similar, I should say, because you know, coming from another country, it's a little bit different. I had a different journey, but it started again, like Shannon with her grandmother. It started with my grandfather with me because he was my biggest cheerleader. There was nothing, I'm not doing anything wrong. Everything was perfect. So to make him proud, I kind of pushed myself in trying to go beyond my boundaries. And again, I understood long ago the benefit of being to have a mentor. And when I came to this country, I literally seek mentors in the areas where I was lacking. So right now, I'm a little bit a mentor maniac. I have mentor for this, I have mentor for that. So I have different mentors to help me get my technical expertise or different area to bring different areas of my life up. You heard, I own my own company. I used to be in the corporate world, but because of my mentor, he pushed me to be full-time entrepreneur. So, I mean, that's pretty much my journey. I have a lot of mentors currently. I do have a lot of mentors, and the fact is that I'm in charge of the Green Bay Packers Mentor Protege Program. You can imagine how much I believe in the mentorship, especially, I should say, in the mentorship in the areas where people need help. But in order to have a mentor, you have to be ready. And we'll talk about later, because you cannot just not be ready and decide, wake up one day and say, hey, I want to have a mentor. It will not work. It will not work for you, and it will not work for your mentor. So saying that, that's pretty much it.
Ryan's computer crashed, but he's getting back on. So I'm going to help out for a second here. So Ty, if you would like to go, we would love to hear from you and your thoughts on mentorship.
Thank you, Mallory, and also thank you to Green Bay Current for this opportunity. And mentorship, I feel, is something that all of us have experienced. We've experienced someone being a mentor, or we've been a mentee, and we've used the term very loosely and lightly. And, you know, oftentimes many of us do go back and say, oh, was our parents, a grandparent, a teacher? And I would agree with everyone else on the panel today. It's, you know, it started early. Mentorship started very early for me. But in terms of like, who was that one mentor or two mentors that really helped me think and pause and make a pivot, I would say one was my advisor as an undergrad at Penn State. And that was the first time I really understood what it meant for someone to ask really hard questions that made me feel uncomfortable, but also helped me feel very safe. And I think good mentorship, strong mentorship, when you serve that role as a mentor, you can ask really difficult questions that you're going to grapple with and maybe not have the answers to, but you know that those are the right questions that you need to be asked. The other thing that I've noticed, and I would agree with everyone else, is that you have to be ready, because you have to be ready to hear sometimes the uncomfortable. I remember a mentor one time said to me that I wasn't ready, you know, like that I still needed to develop in a particular area. And that was hard to hear, but I knew that they had my best interest in mind and they had my success and my development in mind. And so while you have people that are on the sidelines being these cheerleaders, one thing that I found for myself as I've progressed through, particularly at St. Norbert College, is those that were willing to ask really difficult questions, ones that were really willing to push me outside of my comfort zone, that helped me be better. And also that did a little bit more than just say, oh, I'm interested in your development, but I'm willing to walk alongside with you in your development as a leader. And that has been profound for me as a mentor, and especially when I have been mentored as well.
I love that idea of being able to say you're not ready, having investment in somebody's development rather than just outcomes, right? It's a process. It's more than just identifying outcomes and setting goals, right? I guess that goes to the second question that I'd like any or all of you to touch on would be, what differentiates a mentor versus just a role model or an advisor? And I know that a mentor can play multiple roles, and it sounds like in each of your situations, they've played multiple roles, or as a mentor, you've played different roles. So talk a little bit about what differentiates a mentor.
I have some thoughts about that for you, Ryan. I think that the difference between someone who coaches you or a role model in your life, who are also very important people, is that a mentor has actually done it before. You know, and if you think about it in terms of a situation where your life is in danger, if you're going to skydive for the first time, you want to talk to somebody who's done that before. You want to strap on and tandem jump with somebody who knows what they're doing because they have actually experienced it. And I think that's the biggest difference between someone who can coach you, because there are amazing coaches out there who never did your job before, amazing supervisors out there who can lead you through things and without ever having to do it themselves. But it's one thing to look at someone skydiving and another to experience the emotional turmoil that happens to you while you're falling.
The emotional turmoil while you're falling. I think each of us has felt some emotional turmoil while we're falling at some point in our careers. So that's pretty enlightening. Any other panelists interested in jumping in on that?
Yeah, I'll weigh in on that. So, you know, mentor, coach, advisee, you know, there's squishy definitions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm a certified coach, like I mentioned before. I do executive coaching. you know, the differentiator there is, and I play a mentorship role with others. You know, when I'm in coaching mode, we have an outcome. We are driving to a specific set of goals. There is a time period in which we've decided that we are going to do that. Now, I have some clients that I've been coaching for years, but even then it's a reset of the process. We set an agenda, we set the goals. In mentorship, where I've played a mentorship role and still today, those relationships have been ongoing for years. And, you know, they ebb and flow depending on what's needed. But to, you know, what Shannon said, in those, I'm normally in a position of comfort because I've been there, I've done that. I have some touch points where in my exec coaching, I've always been in that exact position before. The other thing with mentorship is sometimes it is, to what Tanisha was bringing up, and Anna as well, is that you're both, sometimes you got to lift the person up. You got to say, listen, I believe in you, you can do this. I would say mentorship sometimes is more of an emotional relationship that you have with someone. I can't say I always have an emotional relationship with my coaching clients. You know, there's respect. There's obviously a level of knowledge about each other, but the mentorship is, you know, that truly based on care and concern, which again, you know, we've all referenced that experience where, you know, the mentor, I said, you know, I remember one when I was talking to again about buying ERC, and I said, geez, I don't know if I should do this, and I don't never run a business before, and she finally said, listen, you can spend your whole life with your toes dangling over the diving board, but either jump in the water or get off the board. And it was that I needed someone to say, quit talking about it, just go do the damn thing. I don't think I've ever uttered that from a coaching perspective before, where, you know, coaching is much more about, well, let's talk about the pros, let's talk about the cons, let's talk about the, you know, what could happen. Where in that case, her feelings entered much more into that than what a coach would have been.
I love that. I love that diving board analogy. Yeah. Anna or Tanisha, anything you guys want to add? No? Okay. Tanisha's good. Anna? No? Okay, cool. So you guys have touched on a couple of the different kind of concepts or topics that we wanted to go into. One of them was you've all talked about accountability and empowerment to some degree. I'm curious how that plays a really critical role in a mentoring relationship, especially when it comes to balancing support and allowing and actually creating situations where they can struggle, right? It's this balance of struggle and support. How do you help establish an attitude or an environment of empowerment and accountability in a mentoring relationship? Anybody can jump in on that.
Well, I will jump into that.
Yes.
So, first of all, I'm a little, again, maybe my perspective is different. So I do believe that when you establish a mentor relationship, first of all, you as a mentee has to show up prepared. You have to make sure that you have your agenda. You have to make sure that you have your goals, because you should not expect the mentor to come up with your goals and to come up with your agenda. You have to, and that's what we're talking about, empowerment. But again, we've talked about at the beginning, Tanisha mentioned it, you have to be ready. So if you're ready to have a mentor, then you're ready to have this relationship like Steve and Shannon mentioned before with this particular mentor. And when you show up, you have to be ready. You have to make sure that on the agenda you said, okay, today we'll talk about this, this, this. At the beginning, you may have some soft conversation, but that should be just 5-10 minutes, 20 minutes at the most. Then you go back and you go and lay out your goals. That's, at least for me, that works. That's what is working. And in consistency. With my mentor right now, my business mentor, every 2 weeks, even if we have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, check-in conversation, we'll make sure that we touch base and we make sure that we have conversation. Again, he will make sure that he's checking my blind spots, because a lot of times we are in the situation and we don't see a lot of it, unfortunately. But the mentor I'm working in particular in this in my business, so he's checking my blind spot. Have you thought about this? Right now, contract negotiation, Anna, you have to think about this. And my mentor right now, the way I selected, and I know we'll talk about later how you select your mentor, but you know, you have to have a certain process, or at least I have a certain process I do when I'm selecting a mentor, like business mentor. I have a speech mentor. So I have mentors for, again, areas I want to excel. So empowerment, Ryan, like you said, you have to come up with your own agenda. They will not come up with the agenda. So they're giving you all the power you need, and you have to make sure that you execute. That's the other point.
Thanks for that, Anna. Yeah, Tanisha.
I can hop in. So I would say, in thinking about accountability and empowerment, while they do lay nicely and align with one another, I think it looks different if you're in a formal mentor-mentee relationship versus an informal mentor-mentee relationship. And I think about some of the informal relationships where I serve as the mentor. I'm much more question-oriented, where I will say, I'll ask the person, what do you want to be true for yourself? And how can I help you get there? And let them be a little bit more in the driver's seat and navigate that relationship a little bit more. When it's a lot more formal, right? While I might ask very similar questions, I'm going to say, okay, let's map this out together and let's plan on checking in every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. So a little bit more structure to that relationship. So while the accountability might be a lot higher in a very formal relationship, maybe the empowerment might not feel the same way depending on what the needs of the mentee is, versus in an informal relationship, and I can only speak for my own, it's much more about that empowerment, like reinforcing, like, okay, you can do this, you have the tools to do that. Remember we talked about that. Or it might be, you know, we might talk 2 or 3 days consecutively and maybe not touch base again for a month or 2 months, depending on what the needs and what that relationship looks like.
That's you kind of hinted at something earlier around not being ready for a mentorship, a mentor. I'm curious if you could follow up with, and if others could jump in too on this, how do you know when you're ready for a mentor, and or how do you know when you're ready to be a mentor? I would guess that that's a question that a lot of folks have, and at different stages in their career. I found in my experience, I fell into a mentorship kind of process where the leader of our organization, or the former leader of our organization, became my mentor and has really dug into my development and just cares deeply about me as a person. I happen to have a lot of plane time and dinner time when we're traveling together, and it's built in, but I don't remember establishing that. It just happens. So yeah, how do you know when you're ready for a mentor or to be a mentor?
I think for me, when I realized I was ready for a mentor professionally is when I started being really honest with myself about the things I'm not good at. You know, and that's not how I would always approach a situation. You know, I would usually have an approach that looked more like, I can do this. I could probably figure it out. But there's a point in your career where you realize you're going to need help from someone who actually knows what they're doing if you want to be successful, really successful. And you need someone who is able to invest in your growth and development too, because we're lifelong learners. You know, no one's born perfect, and we all need help with different things. You know, everyone is different, and we all have our own strengths. So when I got to that point where I could say, you know, I'm comfortable in my own self telling other people what I really suck at, that's when I knew I could have a mentor and I could really invest, you know, in that. But, you know, like you know, like what was said before, you really have to show up prepared. I have one mentor who is more formal, and we actually have a form together, and I fill that form out, and that form has how am I doing personally, how am I doing professionally, and you know, it talks about what are some things that I can really work on. You know, what is the big picture goal that I need to keep my focus on? And that person will say, you know, like, here's kind of how you're bringing this problem on yourself. You know, and I have to be ready to accept that I'm creating a lot of my own problems.
Don't we all, right?
And you know, Shannon, just to I second your opinion, what you just shared, but just to simplify it, I'm more of a simple person. So there's two things I usually ask myself: if I want to overcome something, and if I want to achieve something at a different level. This is it. Once I'm being honest with me, okay, overcome and achieve at a different level. If you have that, so you're ready to find yourself a mentor.
Mm-hmm. If anybody's read John Maxwell's books, which he's got about 3,000 of them around leadership, but the levels of leadership that, to go to that, Anna, if you're looking to move up, not position-wise, but into the next kind of realm of leadership or explore something new, you've got to find a mentor who's explored that themselves. It doesn't have to be in the same field. It doesn't have to be in the same geographic region. Somebody who's broken through that wall, that's the person I want to be my mentor. They've done it. I want to know how they did it. And it's not just about modeling, right? It's about coaching is part of it, as Steve was saying. But yeah, it can really be formal or informal. My next question has to do with actually with boundaries. A few of you hinted at the idea that it can be formal and informal, but there's this personal and professional component to, we don't just grow as a manager of operations in this, you know, in this company. We don't rip our hearts out, put them on a shelf, go to work, and come home and put it back in our chest. That's not how we operate as humans, right? So I'm curious, how does the personal and professional components to this play together in a mentoring process? And what boundaries do you find are important to set in a mentoring relationship? Anybody can speak to that.
You know, I'll start. My my experience has been, I mean, normally the mentorship is work related, you know, where you're normally looking for something. And, you know, as I'm reflecting on that question, Ryan, you know, there was never a point where we said, okay, we're going to talk about X, we're not going to talk about Y. And in each relationship, it was both parties, how much are you willing to open up to each other? You know, you're talking about that last question about how do you know when you're ready to be a mentee? And, you know, for me, I started out slowly. I want to learn more about X. So-and-so seems to know a lot about it. So I'm going to buddy up to them. I'm going to buy them lunch. You know, I need to understand finance more. So I'm going to take the finance geek to lunch, and I'm going to have them explain to me, you know, how you do that. And then, you know, as you find out more and more, I don't remember though the emotional component of it, but I do reflect on it. There are points where I would say, you know what, I'm not going to, this is not this person's role to help me with this. You know, it was awareness of what am I willing to share, and what do I feel this person can really help me with, and where they're comfortable. Same with now, as I mentor others, there are times where someone will, and again, I own a counseling business, so it's inherent to just, people, as much as I always start, I'm not a counselor, people tend to share more of their stories. And there has been on occasion where I've said, listen, I think I can really help you with this. But, you know, if you want to get into this other area, I think there's other people who are better equipped. Now, you can't just shut somebody off from their emotions. You can't just say, well, oh, we're tripping in the personal and we can't talk about it, because to your point, Ryan, they're interrelated, right? We bring our whole selves to work every day.
Yeah.
But I think there are times where, from a mentor perspective, we say, listen, you know, I think I know someone who would be better suited to help you with this. And then there's times where we go, all right, let's include this, but we're exploring this area because it's germane to the actual topic of what we're talking about. Because I'll tell you, a lot of times when I'm helping people, either as a mentor or as a coach, you know, a lot of times what we're working on is the emotional response to issues, right? There's the skills, the tactical stuff, like I talked about finance, but most of the time what we're trying to work through is, how do I respond ideally from an emotional standpoint, and how do I be inclusive with that response rather than being exclusive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's the patterns that we run that we get in our own ways. And I forget who had talked about it earlier. I apologize, but being able to kind of shine the light on it, or hold a mirror up to us. I think Shannon, you were talking about that, and or even like, what are my blind spots? Help me see the things that I'm not seeing. And it takes someone outside of us who's been through some stuff to sometimes shine that light on it. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
If I could, maybe Ryan, going to what you were saying in terms of seeing the blind spots, one thing that I found to be very helpful is, and someone mentioned it also earlier, is vulnerability. And so in choosing a good mentor, yes, you are looking for someone that has done the job before, or maybe has a subset of qualities that you're specifically looking for. But I know for myself, when I look to my mentors, I want them also to be able to show the ways in which they weren't successful, and be okay sharing that. And I put a bow tie on the end of the story and say, you know what, but it turned out great and well, when that's not always true for all of us. You know, we fail, right? We're human, we're people. We fail and we dust ourselves off, we learn the lesson, and we get back on and we do it again. And so for me, in terms of that relationship, I want someone that's going to be willing to have that level of vulnerability to say, you know what, I didn't do this right. And because I didn't do this right, I still have this fractured relationship that every day I'm trying to mend. And it's okay to expose those flaws and the ways in which you're still navigating through that. And that's where I would say sometimes when I like talking about the mentor-mentee relationship, that's where the reciprocity comes in that relationship. Because then not only are we seeing the human side of one another, but then there's that space that we can also support one another and grow from each other within the relationship.
Absolutely. Any other panelists want to jump in on that?
I agree with Tanisha, because, you know, you have to make sure that you have the right chemistry between you and your mentor. When you sit down and have your even first conversation, because I can tell you that when I was qualifying some of my mentors, you know, they had the perfect knowledge, they had everything they needed for me to have a mentor-mentee relationship, but I did not feel the chemistry. So that died. I will not be able, what I was asking myself, am I going to receive this advice with open mind and implement it? The chemistry was not there, so we did not proceed to have a mentorship. So I really agree with Tanisha.
That piece about vulnerability and then also the chemistry, I'm curious from any of our panelists, if, let's say that somebody who's listening today is looking to establish a mentoring relationship, they want to be a mentee, they're looking for a mentor, and maybe in their organization there's not a lot of variety, or their relationships aren't there where they feel comfortable reaching out to, you know, a director level person who's been through it. How would you encourage, or I guess, what would you say to them about finding somebody else who could be a mentor outside of their organization? What could a process look like for them to find that chemistry, I should say?
Well, Ryan, I have to be honest with you. I do not encourage too much like manager, like kind of the manager to be a mentor. because this is my personal opinion on that. Just because what will happen is in situation when you need advice, the manager always will step on the side of the company. That may not be the best interest for you. So if you have a large corporation, I will encourage you to find a mentor from another city to be removed from your department completely. Because when you are sharing some kind of information, again, they will give you their honest opinion, having you in mind. Because if you have interdepartmental manager, then you know that they are looking for the best of the company. And I can give you an example, because I used to work in the corporate world once upon a time, and I observed that. And I was very, very happy to find a mentor who was removed from the operations where I was working, and I received the best advice I can receive. So it was totally different level, and again, that's why I'm against that. So I will encourage everyone to have a mentor outside of the company, or if you want to make sure that you progress, make sure that you find a leader within your company, but remove from your department.
I can imagine, especially if you're you don't want your mentor to be the person doing your annual review, right? There could be some blended lines there that could get a little bit messy. So
that can be your coach. They can coach you technically, give you more technical skills, education, but not a mentor. So that's my opinion, of course.
Well, I'll give you a real life example from that. So I talked about my boss being a mentor. It wasn't a coach. I mean, it was really at times it was almost a father-son. And I didn't realize until well after the fact that I was considered his golden boy. And so I was the company. I mean, there was all this political stuff that I was blind to. I just like, hey, this is awesome, right? And it wasn't until afterwards I realized that was affecting some other relationships and viewpoints of me in the organization. So I wholly support what Anna is saying about, it being someone removed from your function if your organization's large enough, or removed from the organization. The other problem with it internal to the organization is if they've been there a while, you're going to get that particular organizational approach to things versus that, part of it is you're trying to be exposure to external, influence and factors and knowledge and experiences, and you want to avoid that company think. Right.
Any other panels? Shannon, I see.
Yeah, I agree with that. As you were both talking, I was thinking, I have a good example of a situation that I worked in. My first professional mentor was the CEO of the company I was working for, and that was an amazing mentorship for me. And that relationship did work out for me. I still reach out to that person and look to that person as a mentor. But I needed to look outside of that mentoring relationship in order to grow out of the organization. So I did need another person who could coach me on, how could I develop up a little bit further than I think that other person was maybe coaching me to. Because sometimes within an organization, someone wants to mentor you to be amazing in your current position because they don't want to lose you. But I do have an amazing mentor right now who was the CEO of an organization that I worked at. And while that person didn't mentor me when I worked for them, that person mentors me now. She's retired, and she mentors me as, as the director in a different nonprofit. So that is really helpful because I think it's able to give her insight because she knows how I work. I've worked with her in a different capacity before, and she can give me really great feedback on how to improve because she's seen me in action before. So I would suggest, if you do have someone who you really trust, who maybe was your boss or supervisor of your supervisor or something at one point in time, that might be a good person to reach out to. And they'd probably be really invested in your growth as well.
Thank you. Tanisha.
So I know that many organizations, when you're onboarding, might assign you a mentor. And I'm actually going to circle back to a question, Ryan, you had asked before in terms of those boundaries. And so recognizing that there is value in that type of mentor-mentee relationship, right? It's great for if you're coming into a new organization, learning the culture, but also recognizing that there is just as much value in having a mentor that's outside of the organization, which is what everyone else is saying. And so I do want to acknowledge that organizations have set up structures to ensure that their people are successful in the organization by creating those formal mentorship programs, and that there's a place and there's value in that. But as we think about maybe your own growth, your own trajectory, that relationship might not be the relationship that's going to help you achieve your goals or get to the next step in the same way that those very formalized or assigned mentor-mentee relationships are expected to function. And so I agree with everyone on the panel that looking outside your organization is very helpful. I found for myself, conferences was a great way for me to get to know just the landscape, particularly in educational and higher educational leadership, of, okay, so here are some of the qualities that I'm looking for. I want a mentor that's at this type of institution because this is the type of institution that I want to be at. So also using that greater professional network as a means to seek out a mentor.
That's perfectly leading me to my next question. So thank you for that. We've talked somewhat conceptually and anecdotally about mentorship. Let's talk process. If I'm somebody who's looking for a mentor, what's the first step, or what are the first steps I need to take?
Well, I think you got to start with, what do you want? What do you need? What are you looking for? What's the area? There are so many things that a mentor could conceivably help you with. And so you have to identify what you want to get out of it. I have been, and I'll use the word purposely, subjected to the request of, like, hey, Steve, will you be my mentor? And there's two things that concern me about that. Number one is it feels like a bit like middle school, where you just went up to somebody and said, will you be my boyfriend? Will you be my girlfriend? Right? That's,
check yes or no.
Yeah, they say, yeah, pass me a note. Let's build into this. Let's grab a coffee. Let's have a conversation. Tell me what you're doing. And then we can kind of feel that out. The second thing is that when I'm subjected to is in those things, it's the idea of having a mentor versus what's the purpose of having a mentor. And only, as the other panelists have said already, only you can decide what do you need and what are you trying to get out of this. It's not the mentor's job to help you define that. So again, as I've gone through certain pieces, that mentor that I had, and she was both a mentor and a coach when looking at buying a business, it was so I am thinking about buying a business. I need someone to get me out of my own head so that I don't turn this into a purely analytical decision-making process, but someone who will lift me out and make sure that I'm being true to myself and I'm holding myself accountable emotionally as well as, analytically.
Thanks for that, Steve. I appreciate that. Other advice on steps. What do I do?
I think asking people for advice is always a good first step, and not, you don't have to invest in it yet unless you feel like you're growing through that relationship that you're building. But it's really building a relationship, and then once you develop more trust, you're willing to share more and get feedback on more things that you need help with or more things that you're struggling with. But, in the past, I've kind of just, I think maybe without realizing it at first, just talked about some issues with people over coffee who I knew more than I did about it, or who probably have dealt with it before, you know, because that's a pretty natural thing to do, you know, through conversation, you know, and then as I would ask more questions and have more coffee, I'd realize this is a person who gives me really great advice, and I'm comfortable being vulnerable with them. And, you know, they really actually want the best for me. They want to help me reach my goals. And in turn, I want the best for them. So I think it develops pretty slowly, and maybe not always intentionally at first.
Sounds a little bit like dating. I'm not sure about you guys, but that sounds a little bit like dating in 2020. There's plenty of millennials on here. I'm sure you'll appreciate that. Yeah, any other panelists want to jump in on that? Anna, and I'm actually curious, I know based on your first few answers, you're like, cut to the chase, here's what to do kind of thing. I'm curious what your advice would be.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm more of a, sorry, I'm in the business.
I love it.
Business world. So with me, I don't sugar. And you know, with me, you have to understand, for people who don't know me, my culture comes through. Like I'm born and raised to Eastern European country, so my culture comes through very, very fast and furious.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so usually, honestly, I will sit down, and I agree with Steve and Shannon. I will write down, if you don't know what you want, pretty much you're done right there.
Yeah.
So if I'm for all the people who are on the call today, just write down, this is what I want. And again, do I want to achieve something, or do I want to overcome something? So I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's yeah. These are the two questions, but write down what you want, and from there, what you want. Once you write down what you want, then you start identifying who has done it. Like my business mentor right now, he started his business from 0, and right now he's at 10, at least 10. So I wanted the same situation when I was starting my business, and I discovered that he's the one. And I like Shannon's approach. It's like, you know, and you start probing, you start asking, because sometimes you may think that this person is the perfect mentor, but during your conversation, during some cup of coffees, you discover, I don't think so. I don't think I will. If he says something, I don't think I will be able to follow it. So again, first step, write down what you want. Second step, identify some of the possible mentors and start interviewing it. Exactly like Ryan said, it's like a speed dating. And once you start speed dating and identify, okay, now this is my partner right now, then you ask. Because I will be honest with you, do you know how many capable mentors I know in my life? And when we talk about mentorship, they've never been asked to be a mentor, never. And the ideal mentors, I feel, in some situations. So I think the first is write down what you want, identify your mentor, and the last one is ask. These are my 3 steps, if I can give you the recipe. This is my recipe, guys, so.
Yeah, if I can, this real funny story on that. I had somebody, and still obviously in contact with, but they started with an email one time. Hey, I have a question I thought maybe you could help me with. And then, yeah, sure, I give some advice. And then it was like, hey, I want to thank you. Can we have a cup of coffee? And I'm like, yeah. And then during cup of coffee, they had another question, you know, and all of a sudden it was like the movie Step Brothers, like, oh my gosh, am I your mentor? You know, it was just, you know, all of a sudden I found myself, and I never, maybe they had a plan. Maybe they had this approach figured out the whole time, but it was so natural, and I was helping and whatever else, that all of a sudden, yeah, absolutely. And now, again, it ebbs and flows, right? Mentorship tends to be a longer term process. But it was that funny realization, like, oh, am I a mentor? That's awesome. That's great.
So what I'm hearing in everyone's answers is you can't be afraid to take a step. If there's that fear to even step into it, you'll never get what you're looking for. I think the worst thing that could happen is the mentor says, this is what you want. I don't feel like I can help you move towards that. I don't feel equipped to help you on that path, right? And if that's their answer, that's probably the best thing that you could hear from them. An ill-equipped mentor trying to guide you on a path to something they've never attained before, probably not a good idea. Tanisha's shaking her head. She's like, no way. Yeah.
No, I mean, and if I could add to that, and I actually jotted this down because I didn't want to forget, is, and it's all right if someone asks and you're not equipped or you feel as though you can't serve them in a way that's going to be best for them, to say, you know what, I don't think, we can enter into that type of relationship right now, going back to the relationship scenario here. But guess what? I think here's a colleague of mine. This person's a great person. They're a great leader. I think you should go and meet that person for coffee, right? It's okay to do that. And I know that I've had to do it because maybe I didn't have the time to commit, or it was an experience that I never had. Like, I've never experienced that, but guess what? I know this person who has, and they'll be able to support you.
Okay. I've got kind of a tough question before we head into Q&A. I'm curious, when, as a mentor, or even as a mentee in any of your experiences, when have your own experiences gotten in your way? It could be something, limitations or challenges, things that you've experienced that have actually hindered you as a mentor. So something that's gotten in your way of truly kind of serving somebody, supporting them on their path. Curveball.
Well, I'll jump in. I mean,
Okay.
Mentorship, coaching, advising, it's remembering that you can't tell somebody what to do. You can only, in coaching, my job is to help them explore alternatives and options, and to say, okay, does that one, either what could you have done differently, or what could you do going forward? Mentorship, where it's a little more informal, I always have to remember, like, listen, I'm going to give you my opinion, but I'm giving it so you know what I would probably do, but you got to make your own decision. The mistakes I have made when I've said, oh, well, what you got to do is, and then you insert that, and then there's always that voice, hopefully it happens in the same meeting, oftentimes it's after the fact, saying, I said that too much declarative and not enough with a question mark in a room for their own opinion. Because what worked for me may not necessarily be the right thing for you.
Yeah, I thought as I was kind of coming up with some of these questions was, if your mentor is of another generation, which I would hope is somebody who's more experienced than you've experienced different types of economies, different changes in society, technology changes, all of those things, where something that worked even 20 years ago might not work today. So it's kind of there's a challenge there in their approach has to be consistent, but not necessarily the information has to be consistent. That's what I'm hearing, at least. Any other panelists want to jump in? Yeah, Shannon.
Yeah, I would agree with Steve too. Yeah, what I was thinking is that there are a lot of times that I've regretted saying, well, I would do this, or I did that and it worked out. It's not going to work out every time just because it worked out for you that one time. And I didn't realize that, but it's easy to quick go to that, well, this is what I would do, or here's what I think you should do, or, tell people what they should do. And the other thing that I think I've struggled with is just, everyone has their own bias, or, you have your own thought about someone else's growth, I suppose, and like what trajectory they're on, and how that journey's going to look. I guess I'm thinking about this in terms of House of Hope here. We have a lot of case managers, and we all have to learn that the people that we're working with in that type of a setting, in a case management setting, they have their own goals. Whether you think that's a good goal or not, it does not matter. Your job is to support them through that and help them figure out how to be successful. So if you're a mentor to someone who's, they're going on a path and you think, wow, you could go there, but you'd be really great at this. Like, you should shoot higher than that. It's not really your place to, I guess, to say, I think you should do this.
Well, Ryan, just to add to that though, you probably heard, I don't know whether all of you heard, but about reverse mentoring. When the younger generation is mentoring older generations, so it can work both ways. You have to, the only thing is you have to be open.
Yep.
And the only thing to remember in the mentorship relationship is that, you know, you can change, the mentor is trying to teach you how to change the situation, and he's not trying to change you as a person. So you have to make sure that that is intact to during your communication and your conversation with your mentor.
Absolutely. Yep. Tanisha, anything you want to add? No, good. All right. Well, then we're gonna kind of shift course and go to question and answer. So we want to hear from anyone in the meeting, any question that you have. It could be specific to one of our panelists. It could be just a pose in general. So what we'd ask you to do is just pop it into the chat, and then we'll call on whoever. We'd like you to just even unmute yourself and ask the question yourself. So we might have a little bit of dead time for a few seconds until we get any questions, but yeah. I feel like we should be playing Jeopardy music at this point. While we're waiting for any of the questions, if any of the panelists have any advice, I know you've given plenty of really valuable advice, and we're really thankful that you guys were able to provide that for us and take this time. What pieces of advice do you have outside of even taking those first steps about a mentoring process?
I'm sorry, what was that question, Ryan?
Just any other tidbits of advice that you could have about how a mentoring process should work, or any things that you found have been successful in your own experiences.
I would say for myself, it's been stepping out of my comfort zone. I can be quite an introvert. And so, you know, just even reaching out to someone to say, hey, let's have coffee, might not be how most people feel comfortable, just like introducing themselves. And so I'm thinking about a mentor that I have currently. And she lives in another state. We've never worked at the same institution. And actually a different colleague of mine said, hey, you need to read this person's work. And I was doing a project and I just really needed some help. And I knew that she was an expert in the area. And I said, okay, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and I'm going to email her blindly. And I did. And she's been a mentor, and I would say mentor/friend. We've known each other for 12 years as a result of one email. So wow. For the risk, there's a high reward. That's what I would say. It's like, be okay just stepping outside of your comfort zone. And it all works out. It does.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
I think I would add also that, and that's absolutely, you know, I get a little nervous, the person that, you know, comes to me and says, well, I could be your mentor. That like raises a couple flakes. Like, why? What do you see? What do you know? Why? What's your motive? Whereas, so you want a mentor, it is really falling on the ownership of the mentee. You know, the other thing is, and I think Anna said this before, you know, it doesn't have to be a mentor for your entire life or your entire work career or whatever. It can be just this very pinpointed skill set or situational or, you know, whatever that may be. And I think everybody here has said, listen, I have multiple people that I rely on. I was just in a conversation literally in the call before this, because I'm toying with the idea of putting an advisory board in place for my company. And, you know, because I want some more diversity of thought and experiences and I want to have myself and the leadership team held accountable to someone, you know, outside of our organization. And really you could extrapolate and say that's just that's a mentorship for the organization. It's a mentorship for a whole team. You know, that's why tech groups exist, and why you have the, you know, current young professionals, is to learn from each other. But it doesn't have to be a one-shot deal. It can be an army, you know, or a village, if you want to go that road, and say, you know, to assist you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Mallory.
So we have a question that somebody posed in the chat, and they are curious, how do you recommend finding a mentor outside of where you work? And I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but maybe some more tangible items of like, do you recommend emailing? Do you recommend picking up a phone call and making a call? And I know some of you all said going and grabbing a cup of coffee, but is there any more insight you can give into just the steps of finding someone outside of your work?
I think Anna might have a great suggestion to this, but I'm gonna jump in really quick. I'm definitely not doing commercial for anyone, but just sharing things that I've experienced that have led to mentorship. And there are a couple different things going on out there. Steve, you mentioned tech groups. Tech groups are amazing. There are a lot of different tech groups in our area. Some are kind of expensive, and your company might sponsor you to participate in one. And I know that St. Norbert College does some as well. 𝗕𝗂𝗃𝗲𝗃𝗲, she runs one that I've been a part of. And Ryan over at Utech, they run some groups too, and it's much like a tech group. I don't know if they are called that, but they're collectives that they run. And I would definitely recommend doing that because, you know, a lot of conversation today was about finding yourself and searching within yourself and figuring out what are the goals that you want to achieve. And that's a really important first step. I think a lot of the workshops in our community help you get to that. And that's one thing you can seek out professional help from and then, you know, participating in the tech groups can sometimes lead to mentorship. You know, sometimes you meet someone in that format who you find really helps drive you to accomplish your goals.
I think, Shannon, I'm more expert business to business, so personal is different. But for me, and what advice I can give you guys is you can go and, like I said, once you know what you want, you go and start profiling people from LinkedIn even. And to be honest with you, like I said, a lot of, and LinkedIn came out with some research that they have not, all these people, great people, have not been even asked for a cup of coffee or advice. Again, during that conversation, you will gauge where, whether they have, you have the chemistry with them, and then ask. And for asking, Tanisha said, sometimes it's kind of beyond our comfort zone. I mean, it's tough. For me, it's tough. However, I was lucky enough that my current mentor, I was asking questions, business questions, and he will give me books to read all the time. And at the end, he told me, okay, now I will be your mentor right now, your formal mentor, because we always went back and forth. But again, profile people, go to some networking events, and Shannon and Steve mentioned some of them. Check what kind of networking there is. Go. It's, again, a lot of times people don't like that. They don't want to go and introduce themselves to other people. It's pushing your comfort zone a little bit. But you know what? If you don't do it, you're not ready for a mentor, because the mentor constantly will push you to do things you don't like. I mean, my mentor all the time pushes me, and I'm like, really? Do I really have to do it now? So, but you know what? If you're ready for a mentor, you have to push your comfort zone. That is my advice.
Cool, thank you.
And I'll just add something to that, talking about networking. If y'all aren't aware, Current does have networking opportunities every single month. Even in the pandemic, we still have networking opportunities, and we do it monthly. So if y'all are interested in networking and how to get connected within Current Young Professionals, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Also, the Chamber, we do networking events as well, and that's geared more towards the Chamber folks, but yeah, you're going to meet people from both sets of groups. So I would definitely encourage y'all to reach out if you're interested in getting more involved.
Mhm.
There's another question, Ryan. I don't know if you're checking the chat.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, great.
It's a good one. It's a tag question on to how do you pursue a mentor relationship amidst the global pandemic within or outside of your organization? Because we're all experts on global pandemics, or we're getting to be, at least the more TV you watch, right? But yeah, how do you, in a time like this, how do you pursue those things? How do you take that step? And I love the LinkedIn idea of even establishing what do you want. Go find somebody in the role that you're looking to be in someday, or somebody's in that field, an expert in your field. And I know I'm not a panelist, but I'd say use LinkedIn, find them and just reach out to them immediately. The law of diminishing intent says the longer you wait to do something, the less likely you are to do it. So I don't know, what are you guys doing this afternoon? LinkedIning.
Well, I'll tell you, Ryan, I mean, you know, it's also, you have an existing network. Everybody knows people.
Yeah.
They may not be the people to be your mentor, but you start with the people you know. I mean, I routinely, on a weekly basis, I am introducing at least 3 to 5 people to 3 to 5 other people. I enjoy that. If you were to ask me, what do I want my legacy to be, is that I connected really smart, interesting people with other smart and interesting people. You know, there was a professor that I was in a meeting with, and I had a follow-up call, and I said, hey, do you know so-and-so is a professor at this other university? No, introduced them, and now they're having this wonderful discussion. And so you can start with the people in your backyard, not literally, but, you know, the people that you know. One of my advice, this tends to be more when people are looking for a new job and trying to network. What I always tell them is, when you meet with someone at the end of that meeting, say, hey, who's 3 other people you think I should be talking to? And would you mind doing an introduction for me? And you'd be amazed at how quickly, if you keep having that at the end of every networking conversation you have with some intention, to say, hey, are there 3 other people that you think I should know? You won't run out of people to meet. And then the second question is, say, can you do a warm intro? Can you do an email? Right? You know, that's a wonderful way to quickly expand your network. And the beauty of that is, those people are going to introduce you to people that they trust and know. It's not going to be some rando, right?
Yeah, I think that's useful. Absolutely.
If I could tag on to what Steve just shared,
Yeah.
one, I feel like I've been doing that a lot lately. Like, hey, let me do this e-introduction. I feel like I'm much better at writing the e-introduction emails due to the pandemic. But also, even if you think just broadly in terms of the type of work that you do, there are so many webinars. The national organizations are hosting so much online. Like, tap into those, see who those speakers are, especially if they have like a running chat like we have today. Like, this is a great way to, you know, you chat, hey, you asked that question, I'm going to chat privately with you during the webinar, and, you know, you spark up a great conversation, and now you're expanding your network that way. I think one way that many of us have probably gotten to having such a breadth of mentors and different types of mentors that serve us in different ways, or that we serve others, is because we've been willing to grow our network. And in that, we are connecting with people that are not just in our organizations, but globally we're connected, nationally we're connected. So I think I heard someone say, don't waste a good crisis. Don't waste a good crisis. And so build your network.
I love what Tanisha said. I totally agree with you. And I think even, and especially right now, if you're introverted, if you're more of an introvert, it might be easier right now because nobody can go to anything in person, right? So you don't have to go to all these social events where there are hundreds of people. You can just do more of the one-on-one, shoot an email to someone, and people are expecting that now. So now's the time, you know, if you don't really like doing a lot of things face-to-face, to really just take advantage of that. And you know, people are going to be home because they don't have anywhere else to go.
I kind of want to, like, I just want to share something. I know I'm not a panelist, but one of the things that Current really does try to do is reach multiple people from multiple backgrounds, you know, people that are introverts and extroverts. But I think the ambassador committee and all the committees, they do a really great job of trying to connect with people on a personal level. So the minute that you become a member of Current, we've got a team of ambassadors that are reaching out. So like on an individual basis, they'll reach out, welcome you to the organization, ask you if you want to go get coffee, or if you'd like to meet up at one of the upcoming events, that sort of thing. So if you are one of those introverted people, please know that I am definitely not an introvert. I'm extroverted, but we are trying to help people also that, you know, maybe get a little bit more shy of getting out in front of a group, that like a large group, and going alone. You're always going to have somebody within Current, and they do a really great job of trying to welcome folks and make them feel comfortable.
All right, we'll kind of throw out any last questions from anyone on the meeting for our panelists. I'll give you kind of a minute to get any questions in there. A last question that I have that I'd be curious for each of you to touch on would be, what's your greatest takeaway or learning about yourself, about life, about the way that you do things that you receive from a mentor or from a mentee? And if you're willing to share that with the group, that might add some value here. So yeah, what's the greatest learning takeaway, thing you've gained through a mentoring process?
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
No.
Arm wrestle over it. Go.
I'll go. So, and there, trust me, my mentors had fertile ground. There was a lot that they could focus on. You know, if I were to, what was the biggest one was, it's amazing how you remember like the office that you were told this and what the weather was like and everything around it. But the biggest one that my mentor taught me was that you could win, you could win the battle, lose the war. You could be absolutely right at the moment and go home very wrong. And really what that learning was the realization that there is a time and a place to hold your ground, but most of the time it's not necessary. Most of the time you should be looking for a collaborative approach. You should be looking for, again, I use that word inclusive, right? To make your statements, your communication, one that, is palatable to others, that involves others. And, I had this habit, and it's still there, that I like to be right. But what I was doing is I was damaging relationships with that. People were saying, yeah, he was right, but he was an ass about it. And probably that was one of the best things that, he really called me on the carpet on was, listen, there's a way to make that point. There's a way to bring up your opinion, but there's also a way to do so that you're not turning off others by that.
Well, thanks, Steve.
Well, I'll go next. Well, one of the lessons, I have a lot of lessons, but one of the lessons I learned is always strive to avoid stagnation. And in order for me to do that, I have to read a lot of books. That is the pet peeve of my mentor right now. And he pushed me so much that in my car, I don't listen to any music, because at the beginning of our conversation, he's like, what are you listening in your car? Music? Well, do they pay you to listen to music? So I read all the time. And right now with the podcast, reading, so you constantly have to educate yourself. So that's pretty much one lesson, and I still do try to avoid the stagnation, because the worst thing can ever happen to you is just to be stagnant and not developing yourself.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great piece of advice. Shannon or Tanisha?
I would say mine is very close to Anna's in terms of the commit yourself to lifelong learning and building your network. And so I try really hard to ensure that, I'm active in my organizations, that I'm always trying to meet new people, whatever that looks like, and authentically being myself. in those relationships. And I've learned that whether that's being a mentor or being a mentee, those relationships grow organically. Like we don't have to push for them to be there. They will grow organically when we're ourselves.
Love that. And Shannon.
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me was just learning how to be vulnerable. I had to learn that for sure on purpose. And it's okay not to be good at things, and it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to tell people that, especially when you're supervising that person or you're mentoring that person. And that could be in any kind of relationship, professionally or within your family. I think it's really healthy. And once I started doing that, it was really liberating for me. It was very healing for me throughout my life in different areas too. To just say, oh, I was wrong, or yep, I could have done that better. I should have followed your advice, or I really suck at that, and you're really great at it. Can you help me with it? But I think I had to get to that point where I was able to be really honest with myself and vulnerable, and I had a lot of really great mentors who helped me get to that point.
Yeah. In the description for this event, we said change is inevitable, but growth is intentional. I think everybody spoke to that today. This idea that you've got to take action. You've got to seek out the things that you want, and whether that's to be a mentor, mentorship, to receive mentorship. You've gotten some really great advice, some really good stories, some anecdotes, and I appreciate the 4 panelists today. Thank you all for taking time out of your days to join us and to add value for all these young professionals on the call today. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Mallory, to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan, for moderating. We should give him like a virtual round of applause, because that's what I would do if we were in person. But I feel like a pro with these virtual things, don't you?
Getting there.
Getting there. So yes, thank you so much to the panelists for being a part of this today. Thank you to everybody that is on the call right now. One of the things that I do want to say is that first step, what you should do is connect with all the panelists, Ryan, Beth, and myself on LinkedIn. And that's like your first step from something that we learned today. I love meeting new people. I would love to connect you to people in my network. I don't know I know a few people, but obviously I'm not from here, so, but I would love to be able to connect with anybody that's interested, and I love building relationships. So, and I'm pretty sure everybody that's on this call right now that's a panelist, Ryan and Beth, same thing for them. They're going to be more than happy to connect with you. So we will be sending out an email with our information so that you can connect with us. I believe the panelists are okay with that. It's been on the website, so hopefully you're okay with us sharing your information. And I will also be sending out the Zoom link to this call in case y'all are interested in rewatching it, sharing it with other people maybe that were interested but didn't have an opportunity to attend. And on top of that, we'll also have the survey link for you to share with us what you thought about today, and maybe some follow-up questions, or maybe things that you want us to look into doing from here on out, because we all know the pandemic has definitely changed the way that we're going about our world right now. So the last thing I want to do is just thank our sustaining partners, the Green Bay Packers Give Back, the Associated Bank, Purveya, Imperial Supplies, and the Schneider MBA program at St. Norbert. We are so thankful for them. We're thankful for our corporate members, and definitely thankful for all of y'all for being on here as well. So yeah, thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.